How's it going, everybody? And for this Scatterbrain Saturday, I want to go ahead and go over money and just some of the mistakes I've made with it and what I'm trying to do in order to correct that. So this here is money. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but it comes in multiple different denominations here. It's a pain and it sucks to keep kind of track of. It's way too easy to spend and much more complicated to save. And a lot of people in the financial world kind of say you need to get money to work for you. Until recently, I didn't understand what that even really meant. So the reason I actually am doing this video is because I was going over my budget today and it was kind of getting frustrating. And so I wanted to kind of go over some of the things that I've done that have actually made it a little bit more complicated for myself that I probably could have avoided in the first place. So like one of the major things that I did is I used credit cards a lot, and sometimes it was when I had the money to pay it off and sometimes it wasn't. It was on things that both, were necessity and just completely spent uselessly. And in that, there's times where you forget to pay it, or not miss a payment, because if you miss a payment, then you're actually way more in debt than you need to be. They'll rack extra penalties on top of your fees that you have originally. So one of the things is to make sure you pay it in full through each statement. That's something that I really never did, and I've actually had to pull out of some of my investments in order to pay off my credit card debts, because the APR on that and the interest rates are like in the 26% area, 20 between that. I think the lowest I've ever seen on one of my credit cards was in the 20s, or personal loan. And that just really doesn't make any sense when the highest investment that I currently have is making like 13%. So it's really, you're losing twice as much money as you're even able to make. And on top of that, you're able to spend it faster than you're able to put away money. So it doesn't really work out. So I did end up doing a lot of credit cards. When I was around 18 years old and I got my first credit card, I completely had to kind of walk away from it and ended up screwing my credit because of it. Simply because I wasn't paying attention to how much money I was making. I was just spending it like it was water for the most part. Another mistake I made too was not saving as much as I should have when I was younger. I didn't really understand compound interest. I had a lot of impulses, so it was really easy to just spend money when I had it instead of putting it away where it might have made interest and compounded on itself. Like my parents were constantly trying to get me to save money, put money away into bank accounts. They even opened one for me. When I was probably about 14 years old is when I first started kind of doing side jobs and stuff like that. I was working as like a ranch hand. And I was actually getting paid pretty well by the people there. I was getting paid, I would think right around like $15 an hour when minimum wage was like $6.75 at the time. And so in that, I did save up enough money to end up closing the account and buying an Xbox with it. So that was a great investment. And I ended up, I think, paying probably close to $400 for the thing, and ended up at the end selling it for like $75 to somebody. So that wasn't really going to work out too well as an investment. So I mean, and as well, I never really budgeted or wrote down what my income was compared to my expenses. So now when I do choose to do it, and I try to do like a monthly budget, and then maybe about halfway through, just to double check, I redo a budget just to see where I'm at and making sure I'm getting as close to what I said I was going to spend as possible. But before that, I didn't keep track of anything. And you tend to, when you live like that, you tend to actually spend in the future before you make the money, which is a funny thing because you think you have it already even though it's not in your possession, just because you've worked and you're waiting for a payment. Because what ends up happening when you do something like that, you think like, oh, I'm going to get a check in a couple of days, so that way I can spend the money that I have now and replace it with the money I'm going to get. That never works. When I was younger, I used to think like that. So what would actually happen is you end up screwing your budget up because you move your check date actually a few more days ahead. So you're now stretching that second check even longer through a longer period of time because you actually decided that you could spend money a few days before you actually have it. So now you're playing catch up. And there was a time too when I was doing this by actually overdrafting my account. So on top of that, now I'm negative money in my account, trying to replace that on top of money that I've already thought I could spend before I had it. So it really was just like a catch-up game, and you're constantly behind. So I've had several issues too where I haven't even made the late payments or the overdraft payments on the accounts when I was younger as well, and they would just keep racking up. It used to be where they would charge you, I believe, daily, and so it would get really expensive. I believe there was like almost a $350 late or overdraft charge that I had ended up accumulating that I had to work out with the bank. I have been able to keep that same account since I was, I believe, like 17 years old is when I opened that one. But it's been really rough, and there's been some times where I didn't know what to do in the situations I got myself into and just kind of stressed myself out unnecessarily. Another thing that's kind of was a complication that I didn't pay attention to was I ended up going to a technical school instead of probably just going to community college instead and getting the same degree. The technical school ended up costing pretty much close to like $30,000, and I actually did end up going to community college as well for my associates. And that during that time was actually paying me per se because I was getting the financial aid in order to go to the school. So I was actually getting paid to further my education. What I actually noticed that I kind of ended up messing up was during the time, because I went to the technical school first, they actually ate up a lot of my financial aid credits on top of requiring loans on top of that through there were different like Stanford loans and stuff like that were low interest compared to personal loans and other loans you can get directly through the bank. But it was way different when I ended up going to the community college and didn't have to pay anything and was actually able to keep some of the money for living expenses that was left over from the financial aid checks. But because I had spent so much of it originally, I ended up having to pay for the last semester of my school year at the community college, which isn't horribly expensive if you're a local to the area. If you're from out of the area, they do end up charging you more at the community colleges. But it kind of hinders you in that area, and it was unexpected because, again, I didn't really think to keep track of my financial aid credits, which is also money that you can work with and use to further your education, which they give, I believe, because furthering people's education also helps the society in large. So it's not necessarily like you're taking money from the government unreasonably in those situations, but it does help a lot. And when you end up cutting it short, not knowing where you're going to come up with the money to finish your education, that does make it complicated and adds more stress than necessary. Another thing too, so some of the changes that I've actually done is to stop trying to put things on my credit card. I've actually had to take out of my 401k that I recently just started about close to a year ago. It's been close to 2 years at this point, actually. But I had to cut that in half in order to pay the credit card off, which I'll now have to pay back. Luckily, on the 401k loan, most of it I'm actually paying back to myself, and there was a small $50 fee that I'm paying directly to the finance agency. But all of the interest and the principal off of that loan goes directly back into my account. But while it's in my hands and not in the account, it's not compounding interest. It was simply to make sure that I could lower my debt and help to increase my credit and reduce my overall payments, because the payment on the credit card was 3 times as much as the loan payment I'm going to pay from my 401k, which isn't too bad and would actually help me pay it off quicker on the loan because now I can actually increase the payment that I'm paying back. Some of the other things too was making sure that, I did start a 401k. I do have a brokerage account through Robinhood, which doesn't cost me any fees. I'm able to put some money away there. That is in the stock market, so it kind of shifts around, but I really shouldn't have done that until I had paid off the debt in the first place. And another thing that I had done was take out a personal loan, which was a horrible idea at the time. Because I took out the max instead of thinking about like what I just needed to get through the time I was in. So I ended up paying way more in interest fees, and some of that extra money was spent again on things that were unnecessary. So I recently just got that this month actually paid off completely. So that's actually a plus. That's probably the smartest thing I ever did in that situation. Was when I got my tax returns last year, I just gave the whole thing to the loan so that it reduced the principal enough to make the debt payments slower and actually cut the payments in like a year and a half. So those were some of the things that I did. And so now I really do wish I would have started and saved since I was a teenager and was working at the time. At least, 10% of the money is what most people say to save. If I would have saved at that point, I probably would have less stress to work with, more ability just in case I did run into situations like if the car broke down and things like that, if there were repairs around my house, or if somebody that I cared about needed some extra money or something because they were going through a tough situation. At this point, just because I'm like now just getting myself out of almost a drowning situation, for a little bit here, I won't have that ability. And for years, I never had, and was actually the person who needed the help for the most part. So hopefully, with the changes that I'm making in my financial area here, I'm actually going to be able to change the way that I'm able to engage the rest of the world, and be more productive in it, be able to help people a little bit more, especially the people that I care about, but also, just walking through and seeing people in need and not being able to do anything without putting yourself in a situation. It plays on your mind a little bit, and it makes it complicated in order to do what your heart says compared to what your wallet says, and it really constricts you. It makes it difficult to breathe at times. So do your best to start saving as soon as possible. Do everything you can to make sure that if you're gonna put something on a credit card, you have the money already to pay it off. And so you're just working with your credit or some of these rewards cards. If you're only going for the rewards and you're paying it off completely, I don't really see that as a problem. But if you are leaving it on there in order to get the interest payments coming on there, or you're trying to break up payments to do like a layaway system, that's probably not the best idea, because you are going to fall behind if you already don't have the money to pay for something. How are you going to make the payments on it? It's really a complicated situation. And if you can, maybe get your lower education degrees at a community college, and if you'd like to move on from there, you can go to university, because you already have moved yourself up to hopefully be in a higher pay bracket at a job, or even create your own business so that you are more free to do as you please, work for the people you want, do the kind of quality work that you want. And then you don't really get into the constriction of when you're working for somebody, they do run the show. You are working for them. They are paying you. At any time that they're upset with you and you just decide that for whatever reason you don't want to work with them, you shouldn't be in a personal relationship together, and that's going to cut your income. It's not necessarily a bad thing to work as an employee. There are benefits to it because you don't have to require the same amount of stress to run your own business. And it also comes with some financial perks that some businesses give, especially large businesses, as far as like company matches on 401k, stock investments. Like I get 15% off of the stock I purchased through my company. Different things like that, because I am personally an employee as well. But you are exactly constricted to the hours they want to give you, the time they want to give you. You can't work more and you can't work less without it requiring some kind of give and permission from them. You do have to serve the employees the way that they want you to serve them, and even if you feel that they're out of line. You've got to do what it is that your employer wants, because as far as it goes, they're pretty much the ones putting the paycheck in your pocket, even if you're the one working to earn it. And it does also create a situation where you're not able to sell yourself at the price point you want. You're actually going to have to give a little bit up in order to work for somebody else, because they did some of the harder things as far as creating the structure that was there that you're working for. So you do end up lowering your own value sometimes in order to do that. So these are just some of the tips that I had through my financial education in the real world. There are a lot more things that you can do, but make sure you're doing everything you can to pay attention to how you're using it, just so that way you're more in control and more empowered in your own financial world. Thank you guys for joining me, and I hope you guys have a good day.